Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first and somewhat enlarged press conference of this European Council. The four speakers will first give their introductory remarks and after that take a few questions. Now, without further ado, I first invite the President of the European Council, Donald Tusk, to take the floor.
Thank you, Preben. We have concluded a discussion among the leaders about the Brexit deal that our negotiator agreed with the UK government earlier today. First of all, many thanks to Michel Barnier and his team for your outstanding work. The European Council endorsed this deal, and it looks like we are very close to the final stretch. Why has a deal that was impossible yesterday become possible today? Firstly, the new version of the deal has been positively assessed by Ireland. I've said from the beginning that we would always stand behind Ireland and not force a deal unfavourable to Dublin. Secondly, the deal has been positively assessed by the European Commission. This gives us certainty that it is favourable and safe for the citizens of the European Union. The key change in comparison with the earlier version of the deal is Prime Minister Johnson's acceptance to have customs checks at the points of entry into Northern Ireland. This compromise will allow us to avoid border checks between Ireland and Northern Ireland and will ensure the integrity of the single market. The reality is that today we have a deal which allows us to avoid chaos and an atmosphere of conflict between the EU27 and the United Kingdom. Therefore, the European Council invited the Commission, the European Parliament and the Council to ensure that this agreement can enter into force on the 1st of November 2019. Now we are all waiting for the votes in both parliaments. On a more personal note, what I feel today is, frankly speaking, sadness. Because in my heart, I will always be a Remainer. And I hope that if our British friends decide to return one day, our door will always be open. Thank you.
Thank you. And now President Juncker of the European Commission.
Yeah, good evening. This morning, after two other phone calls I had with the British Prime Minister, we reached an agreement. Thank you to Michel, who did an excellent job together with his team. What we have agreed on is much more than a deal. It's a legal text which provides legal certainty to the problems created by Brexit. Le texte sur lequel nous nous sommes mis d'accord.
The text on which we've agreed protects the rights of our citizens. It protects peace and stability on the island of Ireland. Fundamentally, today's agreement applies to people and peace. Our agreement protects the rights of 4.5 million citizens, 3.5 million EU citizens living in the UK, and more than 1 million UK citizens living in the European Union. They can continue to live their lives as before. We've always put people first in these negotiations. The agreement also protects those who receive EU funding by means of the financial regulation. The agreement provides for a transitional period until the end of 2020 at least. It protects our geographical designations of origin and it ensures an orderly withdrawal. We now have a new protocol on Ireland and Northern Ireland, which protects peace and stability on the island of Ireland and fully protects our single market.
That we stand united with Ireland. Over the past 2 years, we have worked very closely with the Taoiseach, and without the Taoiseach, it would not have been possible to reach an agreement today. Außerdem haben wir
Moreover, we have the political declaration on the future relationship with the United Kingdom, and we've revised this slightly. This provides for an ambitious free trade agreement in the future without tariffs and quotas, and robust commitments to a level playing field.
So all in all, I'm happy, relieved that we reached the deal, but I'm sad because Brexit is happening.
Thank you. And now Taoiseach Varadkar of Ireland.
Oh, thank you very much. I want to start by thanking Michelle and the task force for the enormous work they've done in recent years and their profound professionalism. Jean-Claude and the Commission, Donald and the Council, all of the 27 heads of state and government, and Prime Minister Johnson for bringing us to the point we're at today. Also want to acknowledge the real hard work and deep patriotism of the staff of the Department of the Taoiseach and Department of Foreign Affairs for all they've done in the past few years as well. I've really learned two things, I think, about the European Union in the past 2 years, while I've had the privilege of being Taoiseach of Ireland, and that is seeing the strength of the unity of the European Union, how much we can achieve if member states, if the 27 think together, work together and have common objectives. Europe acts as one is a truly powerful force for good in the world. United we stand, but divided we fall. And I think the unity that we've seen in the last few years is a lesson to us for the future, how Europe can achieve its objectives if we're united. And that can be something we take forward into future negotiations, not just with the UK, but with the US and China and Turkey and others. And also, as the leader of a small nation, I've really felt enormous solidarity from our European partners. Sometimes people in small countries believed they can be swallowed up if they join big organisations like the EU. And I think it's been demonstrated in the past 2 years that the European Union really is a union of nations and also of peoples, and one in which small states are protected and respected. Like President Tusk, I have mixed feelings today. I really regret that the United Kingdom is leaving the European Union, but I absolutely respect their decision to do so. It's a little bit like an old friend that's going on a journey or an adventure without us, and we really hope it works out for them. But I think there will always be a place at the table for the United Kingdom if they were ever choose to come back. And I'm certain no matter what happens, we will have good relations with the United Kingdom, a good partnership, political, security and economic into the future. What we have here today is a revised agreement. The backstop has been replaced with a new solution, a new protocol on Ireland and Northern Ireland. It is a unique solution, one that recognises the unique history and geography of Northern Ireland. It's different from the backstop. The backstop was never intended to be used, was only to be temporary, unless and until it was superseded by a new solution, and was to be a sort of insurance policy. And this solution is different. It's more likely to be used to come into force, and possibly could become permanent, but only with the consent of the elected representatives of Northern Ireland choosing to continue this arrangement into the future. There will be, as a consequence of this agreement, a transition period running at least until the end of 2020, but extendable until the end of 2022, in which nothing will change, thus giving certainty to citizens and businesses in Ireland, in Britain, and also across the European Union. And the new solution kicks in for a 4-year period after that. And when that period ends, the decision will lie with the Northern Ireland Assembly as to whether they wanted to continue or not. There will be regulatory alignment on goods, so that any checks will happen at the ports, and a customs arrangement that allows Northern Ireland to stay in the UK customs territory, but is organised in such a way that allows them to benefit from any trade deals that the United Kingdom might do, but still there will be no tariffs on trade between North and South, and no checks along the land border, which is crucial from our point of view. But above all, what I can say today is that our objectives as Ireland and as Europe have been met. Citizens' rights are protected. Those EU citizens living in the UK and also UK citizens living in the European Union. We have a financial settlement. There will be no hard border between North and South. The all-island economy will continue to develop, and North-South cooperation as envisaged by the Good Friday Agreement, can resume and continue. We secured the integrity of the European single market and our place in it, and the common travel area between the UK and Ireland will stay in place. And for those reasons earlier, I was able to recommend that this agreement, that this treaty be endorsed by the European Council, and it has been unanimously. So now the decision moves. It goes on to the House of Commons and the European Parliament for them to consider this treaty, this agreement, and I hope sincerely will ratify it so we can all move on to the next phase of relations.
Thank you. Finally, turning to the EU Chief Negotiator, Michel Barnier.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you very much, Donald, Jean-Claude, Leo, for your constant support, not only today, but all along the last 3 years. Ladies and gentlemen, today's agreement is the result of an intensive work by both sides. The UK government has wanted to open one point in the withdrawal agreement, the questions, the protocol on Ireland and Northern Ireland. We listened carefully and patiently to the arguments. We explained our position. We worked closely with Leo, the Taoiseach, with Simon Coveney, the Taoiseach, and their teams. We persisted also when talks with the UK were difficult, and we succeed together. I won't go into details today. All our texts are available online in full detail, but I want to underline one point I mentioned already this morning. While the subject matter in the negotiating room may often, very often, have been technical about customs, good, borders, what has mattered above all has been, for me and for my team, has been people in Ireland and Northern Ireland. For me, what really matters are the people of Northern Ireland and the peace of the island of Ireland. We know we now need this agreement ratified by our parliaments before the end of October, and then the work on a new partnership starts. Je voudrais ajouter.
I would just like to add 3 personal remarks, if I may, just briefly. First of all, my thanks to all of those who have worked together as a team to achieve today's agreement. Clearly, it still has to be confirmed and ratified by the European Parliament. The European Parliament has played a very significant role too, particularly the Brexit steering group. It also has to be approved by the House of Commons, the British Parliament. Thanks to President Juncker's support, 3 years ago I was able to put together an extraordinary team. I'd just like to thank Sabine Beyant, Stephanie Zrizom, Paula Ndezhnik, Richard Stovskak, and all the members of this extraordinary team. They've been very hard-working. They've always been there for us. They've worked along with the teams from the Council, Donald's team, Jeppe, Didier, the Legal Service, the General Secretariat. They've worked together with the teams of all 27 governments and, of course, the team from the European Parliament, which I've already mentioned. And, of course, the services of the Commission, who've been there day and night to provide their expertise. It's the fact that we've worked together collectively as a team that we've managed to come up with this result. We've got 600 pages in this treaty. As President Juncker was saying, this provides legal certainty, where the divorce that Brexit constitutes really brings so much uncertainty. Now, I've worked throughout those 3 years on the unity of the 27 member states and the European Parliament. It wasn't by pure chance. I patiently worked on ensuring that we maintained that Donald Tusk now, and the future President of the European Council, Jean-Claude Juncker now, and Ursula von der Leyen as future President, will I no doubt cultivate that. Now, Brexit has been a negative experience and process. It's a lose-lose process, but I hope that they will build on that unity to face up to the many challenges which are part of what is a very positive agenda for the future of the EU and for European citizens. Finally, like Donald Tusk and Jean-Claude Juncker, I too very much regret Brexit. I deeply regret it. However, we respect it. It was the sovereign choice of a majority in the UK. I have a sort of Gaullist tendency myself, but I have a great deal of admiration for the UK. I always have had tremendous admiration and great respect for the UK. We will never forget the solidarity shown by the British in our darkest hour. I have great respect for statesmen like Winston Churchill and many others. I have infinite respect for the UK. And this is why throughout these negotiations you will have never heard one word from me that was aggressive or indicated that we wanted in some way to be vengeful. That's not my nature. That's not the way I dealt with this. And it's even more important for the future relation that we proceed with the same feeling of respect and admiration. I think we should move ahead with the task of trying to build something together for the future. The UK is going to be there in the future. It's going to be our economic partner, our friend and our ally to protect the security of our entire continent. Thank you.
Questions before the summit resumes. I think, David, you were the first. Please, in the middle. The gentleman right in the middle.
Thanks, President. Thanks, President. David Herzenhorn with Politico. President Tusk, you mentioned Prime Minister Johnson's concession on customs as key to the deal. I wonder if you can point to a similar concession on the EU side. Is there any aspect of this in which the EU shifted any of its red lines or principles? And also, looking forward, we know Prime Minister Johnson has expressed confidence about ratification, but can you tell us what would happen, in fact, if the House of Commons votes against this deal on Saturday? Will there be an extension? Or, for that matter, if the European Parliament says they need more than 2 weeks to evaluate this very complicated agreement?
The EU side was, from the very beginning in our negotiations, very flexible and open for some creative solutions, and I am not here to comment on the details. You have Michel Barnier and Jean-Claude here to explain in details what is our compromise here, but without our goodwill and very constructive approach, any kind of deal impossible at all. Our intention is to work towards ratification. We support the deal, and this was a clear decision on 27 member states. And we are prepared for this ratification, logistically, politically, technically. Now the ball is in the court of the UK. I have no idea what will be the result of the debate in House of Commons on Saturday. It's not for me to comment on political developments in the UK. But if there is a request for an extension, I will consult member states to see how to react.
Thank you. And we turn to the lady in the third row. Yes, please.
Catherine Pure, EU reporter. We've talked a lot about hell in this press room. I was wondering if we could move on to heaven. And this is you've done a lot of hard work for the peace process in Northern Ireland. But in order to be canonised, you need a verified miracle. So I was wondering, what would you say to Arlene Foster, the leader of the DUP?
It's not for me. I'm not the candidate for a sign. But maybe Leo, because
I don't think I'm a candidate for sainthood either. So I think I'll pass on that question too, if you don't mind.
So we'll pass to the next question, James.
Thank you very much, Preben. President Tusk and President Juncker, what is your message to the 48% of British voters who voted to remain in the EU and are still, some of them, campaigning to cancel Brexit? And Mr. Barnier and Mr. Varadkar, what assurances does the EU have, if any, of continued access to British fishing waters after Brexit?
My opinion is that absolutely clear that I regret that it was only 48, not 52.
I would like to say to the 48 that they were right.
Sur le... Non, je veux juste répondre à la question précise qui a été posée sur la pêche.
There was a specific question about fisheries, an important sector. One day I went to the west of Denmark to talk to Danish fishermen who catch 50 to 60% of their fish in British waters under the common fisheries policy. So many fishermen there and in Ireland are very dependent on British territorial waters. And of course we have to think about exports of UK processed fisheries products to the single market. All that is part of a whole, and we've got to take that into account in the negotiations which will start. If the agreement is finally ratified, we shall give some priority to the conclusion of a new fisheries agreement, providing for access by European fishermen to British waters under conditions to be negotiated. And of course there'll be access for British processed products to the EU market. All that will have to be treated together, and we shall be constructive, and we'll take this as a priority.
Thank you.
No, voilà.
That's the press conference there between four of the key players in this Brexit drama. We had the EU Council President Donald Tusk, the President of the Commission Jean-Claude Juncker, Michel Barnier, who has been part of the negotiating team leading those Brexit negotiations, and Leo Varadkar, the Irish Prime Minister, again a really key player in these talks. Just a few takeaways for me. They were really trying to sell the deal that they've negotiated. Donald Tusk saying this would avoid the chaos and conflict that would happen without it. Varadkar saying it would give certainty. The two key changes that I thought that they were really trying to emphasise was this acknowledgement from the UK that there would be customs checks at the point of entry to Northern Ireland, and also from Leo Varadkar that there had been now a renewed emphasis on consent in Northern Ireland by those politicians, including the DUP, potential concession there from the EU side. And really, I think there was a sense of sadness as well from both Donald Tusk, who said that he will always be in his heart a Remainer, and also from Leo Varadkar, the Irish Prime Minister, saying that it was like an old friend going on a journey, but the door will always be open for a return. Well, with us now is our political correspondent, Tom Rayner, to sort of chew over that press conference. Was there anything that really stood out to you?
Well, I thought that there was a slight change of tone from Donald Tusk compared to what Jean-Claude Juncker said going into the meetings about there being no need for any prolongation of this process, and that being read as Jean-Claude Juncker ruling out any potential Brexit extension beyond October 31st. What Donald Tusk says is he has no idea what will happen in the House of Commons on Saturday, that they all want, in fact all four of them said very clearly they want the Parliament, both in Westminster and here, to ratify this deal. But Donald Tusk said he has no idea what will happen in the House of Commons, and if there is a request for an extension, I will consult member states. So pretty clear there from the EU Council President that an extension is possible if the House of Commons doesn't ratify the bill on Saturday.
It'll be interesting to see Boris Johnson's reaction to all this as well. We are currently standing by awaiting a press conference from the British Prime Minister, due to speak any moment, we believe. I mean, the real, I guess, the elephant in the room, of course, is whether or not this is going to get approved back in the UK Parliament.
It is, and the numbers are looking extremely difficult. There's no way around it. We've been hearing from Sam Coates this afternoon, going through the numbers. The DUP not backing this deal makes it extraordinarily difficult. Number 10 have not agreed to this blindly. They are as aware as everybody else about these numbers. It's not, I don't think, at this point, like Theresa May's position, where she had hoped that people might be able to be won around once the deal was published. I think while there will definitely be a pretty hardcore whipping operation, I think you can say, to ensure that people like the ERG, those hardline Brexiteers on the Tory party, fall into line, and a lot of kind of efforts to woo Labour MPs to back it. I think that this whole process has been undertaken by Downing Street with a view that they recognise it might not be ratified. Now that in itself is a gamble, because that would suggest they are considering the possibility of a narrow defeat on Saturday and then potentially getting into an election, hoping that if an extension does come, that Jeremy Corbyn will follow what he has suggested, which is that he will back an election once an extension has been secured, and that Boris Johnson can go to the people and say, look, this is a deal, it's ready to go. All I need is the mandate of the House of Commons. Help me get a new House of Commons, vote for me. The risk that he is facing, however, is that if you have got people like Nigel Farage saying this deal is unacceptable and the DUP saying this deal is unacceptable, is his pitch as solid as he thinks?
Interesting stuff, Tom. Thank you very much for your analysis. Well, we can now go to Pedro Silva Pereira, the Portuguese MEP and a Vice President of the European Parliament. He joins us now live, so thank you very much for being with us. How much of a concession do you think the EU have swallowed to get to this point of a deal?
Well, I think the most important concession was made by Mr. Boris Johnson, because in fact he did accept border controls at the Irish Sea. And this is the major difference between this agreement and the previous one. I think that an agreement is always better than a catastrophic no-deal scenario, and I hope that this can end the blame game, because in fact the European Union was able to agree two different withdrawal agreements with two different British Prime Ministers, so it's quite clear that we are not here to make life difficult to the UK now that they want to leave the European Union. But an agreement ensures, to begin with, a transition period, and also an orderly Brexit and legal certainty for businesses and citizens. That's, of course, positive. But we will make an assessment, a full assessment of this agreement when it comes to the European Parliament. And, of course, the European Parliament will only have a final say on this agreement after the House of Commons.
Yeah, all eyes now on the House of Commons, of course, to see if this could be agreed. And we've been hearing slightly different things about what would happen if Boris Johnson requests an extension to Article 50, a delay to Brexit. Jean-Claude Juncker seeming to suggest that it wouldn't be granted. Donald Tusk saying he would actually ask member states before coming to a decision. Do you think the EU would grant an extension?
Well, I think that, first of all, an extension will have to be requested by the British Prime Minister, according to the Ban Act. Then it will have to be granted or agreed with the European Council. But the European Parliament has a clear position on that. We are in favour. We support an extension of Article 50 if that is needed to avoid a no-deal scenario. So at least this is a clear position of the Parliament. We've adopted a resolution last month already with a clear position on that. We will support an extension of Article 50 if needed.
And we know how difficult it may be for Boris Johnson to get this deal through the House of Commons. Of course, for any deal to be completely confirmed, the European Parliament needs to approve it as well. Do you think there's any chance that the European Parliament might not approve this deal?
Well, I think the key issue here from the political point of view is really the approval in the House of Commons. And I can very well understand that this agreement raises difficulties in Northern Ireland, because in fact there are some promises of Brexit that are mere illusions. They simply cannot be delivered. So in fact this agreement, it is not possible to go out of the European Union to have a regulatory and customs disalignment and still keep an open border between the two Irelands. So this is only possible if there is a regulatory and customs alignment, as it is provided in this agreement, implying that there will be border controls in the Irish Sea. Now, I understand very well that this is a problem for Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland will become a rules taker. Northern Ireland will have to allow these controls at the border. It will not benefit entirely from free trade agreements negotiated by the UK, and VTA rules and rates will be applicable in Northern Ireland. But that is a consequence of the fact that there is Brexit, and you want to keep, and we want to keep, an open border between those two islands, Northern Ireland and Ireland. And the consequence is that you have to have border controls somewhere else.
So are you surprised that we have got to the stage where we've actually do seem to have got a deal over the line? Just a few weeks ago, we were being told it was impossible. The EU had been telling us that the withdrawal agreement was not going to be open, the backstop was never going to be scrapped. Are you surprised by just how much flexibility has been shown by both sides?
Well, we've been monitoring the process here in the European Parliament. I'm part of the Brexit steering group. Mr. Barnier comes here often, in fact, daily in the last few weeks. So we've been following, and the key element of this is the concessions made by the British Prime Minister. And they made substantial concessions, allowing for this agreement to be reached. If there's this, this has the consequence of getting support or not getting support in the House of Commons, that's what we will see next Saturday. But that's up for the House of Commons to decide.
Okay, thank you very much. I just lost you there, Mr. Pereira, at the end of your answer, but thank you very much for coming on the programme to give your analysis. So in the last few moments, we've just heard that press conference from Donald Tusk, Jean-Claude Juncker, Michel Barnier and Leo Varadkar confirming that from the EU side, the deal has now been signed off. All the way back now it goes, of course, to Westminster, where there are more fights ahead for Boris Johnson. We can bring in our next guest now. The Sinn Féin MP, Martina Anderson, joins us now. Thank you very much for being with us. What do you make of this new deal?
Well, there's no good Brexit, and the people of the North did not give its democratic consent to this Brexit process. That said, this deal is better than a crash-out Brexit, and it affords physical infrastructure on the border partition in Ireland. It also ensures that we're in a situation where prior to that the backstop was temporary, but this comes immediately into force, so it's semi-permanent arrangements. So you get away from the nonsense about technological solutions and magic fairies and that didn't exist, to try to avoid physical infrastructure in the border partition in Ireland. So where we're at the moment, we're still assessing it, obviously. The issue of consent is messy and convoluted, to say the least. And when you consider we don't have a Stormont Assembly sitting at this moment in time because of a denial of rights, and I think that's a common denominator that the people of Britain will find with the DUP and what we have found in the north of Ireland trying to deal with them, that they are, rights deniers and human rights deniers, and so we're in a difficult situation.
This is a very different matter from the one that we've got at the moment with Brexit. Though I'm interested in that issue of consent, but we will have to leave it right there, unfortunately, because Boris Johnson is just walking into the room ready to give his press conference. Let's have a listen.
For the UK, in the sense that the European Council has approved the agreement that's been negotiated over the last couple of months, and I thank them again very much for their work. I particularly thank Michel Barnier and his team. I thank Jean-Claude Juncker, President of the Commission, for all the personal effort that he has put into getting this deal done. And I want to stress that this is a great deal for our country, for the UK. I also believe it's a very good deal for our friends in the EU. And what it means is that we in the UK can come out of the EU as one united kingdom. England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland together. And it means we can decide our future together. We can decide, we can take back control, as the phrase goes, of our money, our borders, our laws together. And we will be able to do free trade agreements around the world. And we can also build now, after 3.5 years, we can build now on our relations with our friends and partners in the EU. And it will be a very exciting period now, as it were, to get to the positive side of that project. The extraction having been done, the building now begins. And I'm very confident that when my colleagues in Parliament study this agreement, that they will want to vote for it on Saturday and then in succeeding days. This is our chance in the UK as Democrats to get Brexit done and come out on October the 31st. It's our chance to focus on our priorities, the people's priorities, the NHS putting 20,000 police on the streets, lifting up funding of education across the country, the biggest expansion of the living wage. Those are the things I think the people of our country want us to be focusing on in addition to Brexit. We've been at this now, as I say, for 3.5 years. It hasn't always been an easy experience for the UK. It's been long, it's been painful, it's been divisive. And now is the moment for us as a country to come together. Now is the moment for our parliamentarians to come together and get this thing done. And, as I say, to begin building a new and progressive partnership with our EU friends, with whom, of course, we share so many priorities. Now, I have to go to dinner. I'm late, fairly soon, but I'm told to keep this very tight indeed. But I'm going to go to Laura Koonsberg of the BBC.
Thank you very much. We can keep this very tight. 2 very quick questions. Why are you confident this can get through Parliament when it doesn't seem to be the case at home? And what on earth will you do if this falls on Saturday?
Well, thanks, Laura. I think that there is, as I say, a very good case for MPs across the House of Commons to express the democratic will of the people, as we've pledged many times to do, and to get Brexit done. And as I have never tired of telling you, and I repeat again, I don't think there is any case for delay. We should get on and get it done by October the 31st. Robert.
Prime Minister, was there literally no other way of getting the deal other than to turn over your partners in government, the Democratic Party?
I think this is a very good deal for every part of the UK, and particularly for Northern Ireland. And I would point out that, as I say just now, from the beginning, Northern Ireland will be able to join with the rest of the UK in doing free trade deals around the world, and all the other benefits that flow from membership of the UK market, and of course, without having any checks, any infrastructure of any kind at the border in Northern Ireland. And I think, in that respect, it is a great success. I'm going to take 2 more questions, and I'm going to go to the distinguished Mr. Dimbleby in the front.
How will this deal help heal the deep divisions over Brexit in the country?
I think that's a very, very important question, and I do think that the answer is that it will, because what it will enable us to do is to get, as I say, the process of extraction behind us and enable us to come together and focus on building a new partnership with our friends across the Channel, our friends, not just our friends in Brussels, but obviously in every other European capital. And one of the things that we're doing is building and strengthening our bilateral relations as well, and expanding our network across the European capitals. George Parker. And then that's it, I'm afraid.
Come on, you can. If you can miss a bit of the dinner.
I was asked to take 4 questions. I'm going to
take a few more. Take a few more. Prime Minister. Yeah, take a few more. Prime Minister, we heard what Jean-Claude Juncker had to say earlier about the fact that he personally didn't think there should be an extension to the Brexit process beyond October the 31st. Did you ask your fellow leaders to make a similar commitment, and have they done so?
It's been very clear for a long time. I don't think that delay is to the advantage of the UK or indeed of the whole of Europe. I think people want to move this thing on. It's been going on for a long time, and that's a view that seems to be quite widely shared. Tom, then Pippa, and then that really is it. Okay, Tom, Pippa, and then Beth, and then that's it.
Prime Minister, you've suspended the whip from 21 Tory MPs when they voted for the Ben Act. Will you treat this vote on Saturday as a similar confidence motion, and will you suspend the whip from any Tory MPs who don't vote for this deal?
I'm not going to get into whipping in this illustrious forum. What I will say is that I do think there is a very good case for voting for this deal on all sides of the House, and we will certainly be taking that vote very seriously.
Prime Minister, I have a second quick go on the whipping. Would you restore the whip for the 21 MPs that you have ejected from the party? And why should Labour MPs particularly trust you to deliver on your promises in the political declaration over workers' rights? That's a big problem for them.
Well, look, thank you, Pippa. On the vote, it's a big and important vote, and we'll be making further announcements about that in due course. And there are a series, as colleagues, as you understand, there are a series of votes. On the political declaration and that text, I do think it is a good text. It gets to the heart of what we want to achieve as a UK in our relations with the EU in the future, a best-in-class free trade deal, but also a fantastic new deep and special partnership that we want to build. Yes, of course, it does also contain important provisions and commitments that this country gladly makes about our determination to maintain the highest possible standards, both for the environment and for social protection. We make those commitments gladly, and they're entirely right for our country to do. Beth, positively last question.
Thank you. Prime Minister, Nigel Dodds said earlier today that you were too eager by far to get a deal at any cost, and the cost has been their support. You have the deal, but you don't have the votes. Your predicament no better than Theresa May's. Are you making the same mistakes that she did?
Well, I think, as I say, thanks, Beth, I think that this is a very good deal. I'm very confident that when MPs of all parties look at this deal, they will see the merit of supporting it, getting Brexit done on October the 31st, and honouring the mandate of the people, honouring the promises that were made repeatedly by parliamentarians to the people to get Brexit done, and giving us all a chance to move on. I think the imperative is very, very strong. The opportunity is great, so let's do it. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Boris Johnson speaking there after the deal approved here in Brussels, very keen to emphasise that he thought, of course, that it is a good deal, that it's something that would allow the whole of the United Kingdom to leave the EU together as one. But there was a bit of a nod there to some of the difficulties that potentially lie ahead for him in Westminster, a plea perhaps to MPs that after a Brexit that has been at times long, painful and divisive, in his words, it's time to come together, vote for the deal and get Brexit done. We're joined now by Tom Rayner and also by Adam Parsons to talk through some of the implications of what we've seen today. And Tom, Beth, our political editor, really said it in her question, didn't she, that there are similarities between Boris Johnson and Theresa May. He might have the deal, but has he got the votes?
Yeah, and that's the question, really, because what Boris Johnson has done is in many ways similar to what Theresa May is doing, but there is a fundamental difference. He has decided to go against the DUP and not to change the position to try and keep them on board. And at the start of this news conference and then at the end, he repeated this phrase. He is very confident that he can get this deal through Parliament and that he believes MPs from all parties will back it. He denied that he had thrown the DUP under the bus. He said that this deal does provide for Northern Ireland in a good way, that Northern Ireland would benefit from being part of the UK's customs territory. It would still benefit from the fact that it will be able to join in free trade deals that, of course, he believes is a key part of the Brexit process. So Boris Johnson saying he's very confident and denying that he is taking the same risk that Theresa May did, which is to agree a deal here and then hope that it gets through Parliament. He thinks it will.
It's interesting in a way, isn't it, that once again it's going to come back perhaps to the UK Parliament. The EU showed some flexibility. They've managed to get the deal across the line when a couple of weeks ago everyone was saying it was impossible.
Yeah, it's interesting seeing that quite sort of chipper performance from Boris Johnson. Reminded a little earlier, Mark Rutte, the Dutch Prime Minister I spoke to, and I said, well, there are these obstacles, and he said, look, for the moment, let us rejoice that we have a deal. He said, we will come to the vote on Saturday, but let's rejoice now. And I think that, in a sense, is the idea that Mr. Johnson, I think, is trying to get there, is that the moment, let's enjoy this. Let's enjoy the fact that after years of negotiations, after all these setbacks, there is a deal there. Now, clearly, Brussels is full of people who went, fine, we've been down this road before, we've had a withdrawal agreement, and it got defeated in the Commons. And there are plenty, so who are already saying to me they don't think this one will get through either. That's from the European side. But equally, these institutions want to stand up and want to say, we have worked hard. I mean, I've just come from a briefing, a particularly high-powered briefing, which had Michel Barnier, Jean-Claude Juncker, Leo Varadkar and Donald Tusk sounding like a sort of boy band on the stage, a quartet on the stage, all bigging up this deal. Donald Tusk is the president of the European Council, and he talked about the deal and about his personal reaction. I think we can have a little flavour of what he had to say.
This compromise will allow us to avoid border checks between Ireland and Northern Ireland and will ensure the integrity of the single market. On a more personal note, what I feel today is, frankly speaking, sadness. Because in my heart, I will always be a Remainer. And I hope that if our British friends decide to return one day, our door will always be open.
Thanks to Tom and Adam for that analysis. And as Adam was saying, I think there's perhaps a desire here in Brussels to take a pause, to reflect and rejoice on the fact that a deal has at least crossed the line. But I can't help but think that it's going to come back to the stark reality in Westminster pretty quickly. Back to you now, Mark.
Yeah, Sophie, thanks very much indeed. And it is a stark reality. What happens in this place come Saturday? It's all about MPs now, and two of them are with me. Sam Gyimah used to be a Conservative, now Lib Dem, and Damien Green, still a Conservative, I think. First of all, will you be voting for the deal, Damien Green?
Yes, I will. I think this is a good deal, and I've said all along, I think it's overwhelmingly better for Britain to leave with a deal than without a deal, and that's pretty much the choice we're faced with now, looking ahead, the next few days and weeks. And so Saturday is the opportunity, I think, particularly for all those on all sides who said, I will do everything to stop a no-deal Brexit. Okay, now's your chance on Saturday, vote for the deal.
I mean, we have been here before, of course, with Theresa May's deal, and that went pretty badly wrong, didn't it?
It did, and this is a different deal. The thing that stopped Theresa's deal going through was, by and large, the Irish backstop arrangements. Those have now gone. Boris was told when he became Prime Minister there's absolutely no way the Europeans will reopen the deal. They have reopened the deal. The backstop has gone, and therefore I think this is a better long-term permanent arrangement for Northern Ireland.
Just very quickly, a penny for Theresa May's thoughts. Have you been speaking to her at all in the last few hours?
I haven't spoken to her in the last 24 hours.
Do you think she'll be voting for the deal?
I'm sure she will, yes.
She will,
yes.
Yeah. So Sam Gyimah, I mean, if you were a Tory still, you'd probably be voting for this deal, wouldn't you? You're now a Lib Dem, you can't possibly vote for it.
No, I voted against every one of Theresa May's deals, even though the Conservative Party will support it, and I would still vote against this deal. I think this is materially worse than Theresa May's deal. This is the deal that Theresa May rejected. This was the EU's first offer, and Theresa May, who Boris Johnson described as weak, rejected this deal. It's now been embellished and presented as something else. It's like putting lipstick on a pig, and we're being told this is a negotiated masterstroke. No wonder the EU is telling us,
Well, we were told he wouldn't be able to amend the withdrawal agreement. That's happened. He wouldn't be able to change the backstop. That's happened. So it's quite a political achievement for Boris Johnson.
I think when people thought he was going to do that, people thought he would do that in a way that will keep our country together. But today we face the prospect of a UK that will be broken up. That's why the DUP cannot support this. And there is no mandate in the referendum for the breakup of our country. And he has let down the DUP, and today the Conservative Party cannot describe itself as a Conservative and Unionist party. I will be voting against because this is anti the Union. I'll also be voting against because it is no blueprint for our future. What I know is being told to people in the House of Commons today is to the hard Brexiteers, don't worry, you can still get no deal. And to the soft Brexiteers, don't worry, we'll do soft Brexit. You can't have both.
So, Damien Green, how do the numbers stack up for Boris Johnson? Is there a way you can see he gets this through?
It depends on individual. It'll be tight, but it depends on individual MPs. I completely disagree with everything Sam has just said. I don't think it breaks up the union. I think Northern Ireland stays within. Well, the DUP hasn't supported any deal yet. I think, I regret that fact.
The cost of it is throwing the DUP.
Also, since when did the Lib Dems rely on the DUP for political cover? This is an interesting political.
In a sense, it is throwing the DUP under the Brexit bus.
I don't think it is. It's not throwing Northern Ireland. It keeps Northern Ireland inside the UK customs union. They will be able to take advantage of any trade deals the UK signs, and more importantly, it means you don't need any hard border. I mean, the real thing about Ireland, obviously, is keeping the peace there, keeping the peace process going.
The backstop was all UK-wide. Boris said he'll get rid of it. What he's done is he's made it permanent for Northern Ireland, but it doesn't apply to the UK. And that has long-term consequences for Northern Ireland, because if Northern Ireland are obeying EU rules, it moves them much. You create a situation where United Ireland is more likely, but also Scotland turns around and says, why can't we have that? Why can't Wales have that?
Well, that's some way down the road. I mean, just talking about Saturday, will you vote for a deal that has a confirmatory referendum attached to it then?
If it has a confirmatory referendum attached to it, obviously I will vote for it. My view is that Brexit is not working out. I want to stop Brexit. But if we are going to give the people a final say so that they can choose the future that they want, I think it's the right thing. Why does Northern Ireland get consent, but Boris is against the rest of the UK consenting to this deal?
Just on the point of the union, I mean, do you worry now about the future of the union?
No, I don't think this has any effect on the union at all.
You don't think it brings United Ireland closer?
No, I think a good deal, which I think this is, which will actually help the Northern Ireland's economy, will in the long run preserve the union, because this is good for Northern Ireland business. They in fact get as it were free access both to the rest of the UK and also to the single market through the Republic. So I think Northern Ireland will actually have huge economic benefits from this, and that in the end will help the union.
I mean, do you not accept the argument, Sam Gyimah, that Boris Johnson saying their people now just want to get on with this and they want this done, going down your route does involve many more months, possibly a year or more, of this divisive bitterness?
I think there are 2 points there. The first point is that presenting this as though the outcome is immaterial is just false. When people say they want Brexit done, they're not saying they want to choose a poorer and less secure future for themselves. So what Boris is doing is exploiting the public exhaustion for this to come up with a deal that satisfies the Conservative Party's need to squash the Brexit Party. The second point here is Brexit is far from done. We are at the foothills of a long drawn-out negotiation. I heard Jean-Claude Juncker today saying, if this deal were to go through, on the 1st of November, we start the trade negotiations. And that is that's a process that takes a long time, and we will be in a situation where our hands are tied behind our back, negotiating with this bloc. And as we've seen, Boris has had to concede a lot to even get where he's got to. So it's not done yet. It's not going to be done for a long time. And I think it's a deception on the British public to suggest that somehow sign here and it will all be over.
Right, only a minute left. Damien Green, I mean, do you think you'll have enough confidence, or Boris Johnson would have enough confidence in the deal to put it to, his deal? Or a
I think the idea of a referendum is seriously terrible. It's not the end of a process, it's the beginning of a process. And we've seen what happened after we had the previous referendum. It wouldn't unite the country, it would divide the country again, and it wouldn't be decisive.
If he's telling us this deal is so great, why can't he defend it with the public?
Of course he defend it, because we have a parliamentary democracy in this country, and we'll see on Saturday whether there's a parliamentary majority for it. That's the way we do democracy in this country. I think we've seen the effects of one referendum. Another referendum would be a terrible idea for this country.
One word answer, does it get through on Saturday?
Yeah, I hope so, yes.
Struggles.
It struggles, but you concede it may get through.
I think it depends. It comes down to Labour votes. If Labour MPs support it, then it will get through. But as I said, any deal that Labour MPs who want to soft Brexit support and Tory hardliners support, someone's going to be disappointed.
Okay, Sam Gyimah, Damien Green, appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed. So we've heard from the Conservatives and the Lib Dems there, but the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has made it clear he will not support this deal.
It doesn't meet our demands or our expectations. It creates a border down the Irish Sea between Britain and Northern Ireland, and it leads once again to a race to the bottom in rights and protections for British citizens, and a danger, I beg your pardon, sorry, a danger of the sell-off of our national assets to American companies.
Could you vote for it if a confirmatory referendum was attached to it?
We are unhappy with this deal, and as it stands we'll vote against it, though obviously we need to see all of the last details of it.
So how are the numbers stacking up ahead of Saturday's vote? Sky's Rob Powell is with me now. So Sam Gyimah just there almost conceding that this could go through. How is it all adding up, do you think?
It's going to be seriously tight whichever way it goes. About 320 votes is the magic number. That's ballpark area that Boris Johnson needs to get to if he wants to get that through. I think he's got most Conservatives or existing sitting Conservatives that haven't been booted out of the party on side. That takes him up to about 287. Most of the Brexiteers look like they're going to fall in line. On the other side, we know obviously most Labour MPs will be voting against. The SNP, the Lib Dems, they'll all vote against as well. So crucially, what this comes down to is two pools of MPs. On the one side, there are those former Conservatives who are worried about no deal, about 21 of those. And then there are Labour MPs from pro-Brexit areas, places where they want to see Brexit done. MPs worried maybe that if a general election comes along and they're seen to be standing in the way of Brexit, then they might lose out at the ballot box. Now, in terms of which way they're going, I think maybe 12, 13, 14 of those 21 ex-Tories will probably go for it. There are concerns, though, about the plot that Boris Johnson is making for this future trade deal. Is it going to be a hard Brexit? Are there going to be impacts for things like workers' rights, environmental standards? They're concerned about that. That might chisel a few off. Same concerns for some of the Labour leavers as well. People from Brexit constituencies, they're worried about where this is going in the future. So I think there's a lot of persuasion to do. And remember as well, there'll be amendments that will come through on Saturday, probably an amendment for a second referendum. We don't know yet which way Labour's going to go on this. Jeremy Corbyn earlier.
There seems to be a split here. Yeah. That Jeremy Corbyn asking for this vote on a referendum to be delayed until next week?
Yep.
And it seems that Keir Starmer, who we're going to talk to shortly, seems to want to push ahead with this Saturday. What's going on there?
So I think it's the sort of usual splits in Labour opening up again over this issue of a second referendum. Keir Starmer, the shadow Brexit secretary, someone who has been more vocal in favour of another referendum, he tweeted today saying that Labour will be making the argument for this deal to be put to the people, put to the public. He said that this afternoon. Jeremy Corbyn, of course, earlier wants this to be more a straight up and down yes or no vote on Brexit, and basically wants the deal to be defeated and then issues around a second referendum to happen later in the week. Now, I think Labour, Jeremy Corbyn is going to come under a lot of pressure in the coming days. He's going to come under a lot of pressure to get behind, I think, a push for a second referendum to try and put any Boris Johnson deal back to the people in a referendum. So I think that's what we'll see playing out. A lot of dramatics, a lot of skirmishes going on. I think Saturday's going to be the big crunch day.
It is the big day. Yeah. All right, Rob, thanks very much indeed. Okay, this is Sky News. Coming up, a sports update.
Coming up, former England footballer